Part 1. The apartment that seemed too perfect when I moved into that apartment. I thought I was finally catching a break. It was my first time living completely on my own. No roommates, no shared kitchen nightmares, no tiptoeing around other people's moods. I had just landed a new job and fresh out of college, and the city felt like it was holding its breath for me. The place was small, sure. A one bedroom on the second floor of an older brownstone style building in a quiet neighborhood. But it was clean, cozy, and most importantly, within my budget. And in this city, that was a miracle. My landlord, Greg, was a man in his late 40s with a quiet, almost shy demeanor. Balding, always in khakis, the kind of guy you wouldn't look at twice at a grocery store. He owned the building and lived in the downstairs unit. When I came to view the place, he seemed polite and professional. I tried to stay out of my tenant's way. He said with a smile, handing me the keys after a quick tour. But if you ever need anything, I'm right. Downstairs, it felt like a dream. A safe neighborhood, a responsible landlord, and total privacy. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. Until USN single quotes T dot the first signs, it started small. I'd leave something in one spot, come home, and find it moved. Not dramatically. A book slightly off center on my coffee table. A throw. Pillow turned the wrong way, or the lid to my toothpaste not screwed on, like I always did. At first, I blamed myself. I was working long hours, constantly tired. Maybe I was being forgetful, but then it escalated. One night. I was lying in bed when I heard a soft click from the living room, like something mechanical shifting. I froze, holding my breath. My apartment was dead silent, but I knew that sound. Wasn't in my head. The next morning, I found my TV turned slightly, like someone had stood behind it and nudged it. Again, I told myself I was imagining things, but I double use and single quotes T dot the day everything changed one Thursday afternoon. I came home early from work feeling sick. As I entered, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt off. There was this faint smell in the air, not strong, but unfamiliar. A combination of cologne and something sterile, like rubbing alcohol. And then I noticed my bedroom closet door. It was slightly ajar. I always kept it closed. My heart began to race. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the closest thing to a weapon I had, and slowly opened the closet door. Nothing seemed out of place. But when I knelt down to check the back corner, something caught my eye. A tiny red light dot. It was embedded in the back panel, no larger than a shirt button. My first thought was that it was part of the smoke detector or wiring, but the closet had no power outlets. And then I saw it. A small, nearly invisible lens behind the plastic. A camera. I stumbled back in shock. My knees nearly buckled. Someone had installed a camera in my bedroom closet, pointing out, and I had no idea how long it had been there. Panic and denial, I stood, frozen in the hallway, trying not to scream. Was someone watching me? How did this get here? Was it the previous tenant? Some kind of prank? A crazy neighbor? And then my eyes widened as realization crept in. The only person who had consistent access to my apartment was Greg Dutt. No, no way. He seemed so normal, so quiet. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe some security system thing. Maybe it wasn't even connected. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. This was deliberate, hidden, well placed, and functioning. I yanked it out of the wall, heart pounding in my chest, and placed it on my kitchen table like it might explode. My first instinct was to call someone. But who? My mom? She'd panicked. The police? What if I was overreacting? I decided to take a breath and think. I started researching the device online, entering the numbers etched on the side. Within seconds, I found the exact model. It was a Wi-Fi enabled hidden surveillance camera, often used for covert indoor recording. It even had night vision. I wanted to throw up. Confrontation or caution. I paced around my apartment for hours, checking every outlet, every vent, every picture frame. I found two more cameras. One tucked behind a vent in the living room. Another inside a smoke detector in the bathroom ceiling got at that point. I couldn't think. I couldn't eat. I couldn't breathe. I packed a small overnight bag, shoved the cameras into a grocery bag, and left. I didn't confront Greg. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to do this right. Because if I was going to accuse my landlord of spying on me, I had to be airtight. I crashed at my coworker Kayla's place and told her everything. She was horrified. You need to go to the police, she said. I nodded, still unsure. Before I did anything, I'd reach out to a tech-savvy friend of mine, Connor. He worked in cybersecurity and owed me a favor. The next day, he met me at a coffee shop. I handed him the cameras. He examined them carefully, then looked at me with a grim expression. These are live streaming devices, he said. They weren't. Recording to a card, they were sending footage somewhere, and I can probably trace where. What he found 2 days later, Connor called me with an update. They were connected to a private IP address registered to someone at your buildings. Local network. Someone with access to the building's router. Someone like your landlord. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself, Greg. The quiet man in khakis. The guy who lived right below me, He had been watching me for weeks. Maybe months. And I had no idea how far it had gone. Connor saved the connection logs. Screenshotted the data. Made sure we had everything. The next step was clear. I wasn't just going to report him. I was going to make sure he never did this to anyone else again. Part 2. The truth behind the walls. After Connor gave me the confirmation. Everything inside me changed. Up until that point. I was scared. Panicked. Unsure. Now, I was furious. This wasn't just a betrayal of privacy. It was a violation of my home. My sense of safety. My landlord, someone who smiled at me in the hallway, who handed me the keys to that apartment, had been watching me like I was some kind of show. The fear turned to fire. I wanted justice. Going to the police. Kayla came with me when I went to the station. I brought everything. The physical cameras, the screenshots from Connor, my written timeline of everything strange I'd noticed. The officer at the desk looked skeptical. Until he saw the devices, he called in a detective. Detective Ramirez, late 30s, calm voice, sharp eyes. She asked me to walk her through it all again. From the first moment, I noticed something off. She took notes. A lot of them. She told me, if these cameras were placed by your landlord, it could constitute felony invasion of privacy and unlawful surveillance, especially since they were hidden in intimate areas like your bedroom and bathroom. Finally, someone was taking me seriously. They said they'd begin investigating immediately, but warned me to avoid tipping Greg off while they worked to obtain a search warrant. I nodded. But staying quiet while knowing what he'd done. It made my skin crawl. The waiting game. I stayed at Kayla's place for the next week. Every time I walked past the building to check on things, I felt sick. I'd glance at the upstairs windows and wonder if he was watching. Wonder if he was deleting footage. Wonder if he was already preparing for what might come. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't work. Every time I closed my eyes, I had pictured his face, calm, unbothered, walking through my apartment when I wasn't home. I later learned that the police were doing quiet surveillance. They placed a camera across the street from the brownstone and monitored who came and went. They pulled records from Greg's internet provider. They cross-checked tenant complaints from the past 5 years. And what they found made my stomach turn. I wasn't the first. Detective Ramirez called me in one evening. She sat me down and said, "We believe this isn't the first time he's done this." They'd spoken to 2 former tenants, both young women, who had mentioned feeling watched or uneasy while living there. One had even reported strange behavior. Items moved, mail opened, the bathroom fan acting strange, but nothing ever came of it. No one found the cameras. No one had proof. Until now. I became the one who cracked it open. They were preparing the warrant. The raid on a rainy Tuesday morning. I got a call. We're executing a search today. Stay clear of the building. I sat in Kayla's apartment, holding a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking, shaking. At 9:47, the texts started coming in, neighbors messaging me that police cars were outside. That officers were going into Greg's unit. They found it. They found everything. Multiple laptops, hard drives, a network hub, cameras labeled by apartment, folders, timestamps, even folders. Named with my name. He had saved footage. He had organized it. He had watched people live out their most private moments and filed them like trophies. One folder, according to Detective Ramirez, was titled simply Upstairs Girl. Full set. I nearly threw up. The arrest Greg was arrested that afternoon. I wasn't there when they put him in the car, but I saw the mugshot online. Same blank face, same dull cockies. His charges were serious. Felony unlawful surveillance, invasion of privacy, possession of illegal surveillance equipment, and more. Depending on what investigators found on the hard drives, he was denied bail. The news hit local outlets within hours. Landlord accused of secretly filming tenants inside their homes. The headlines were everywhere. Neighbors were horrified. People in the area who had rented from him years ago started speaking up online. But there was still one thing that haunted me, the footage detective Ramirez told me gently. We recovered videos of you. I didn't ask how many. I didn't want to know, but I did ask, did he post them? She shook her head. So far, we found no evidence of public distribution. Everything seems to have been for his private use. I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. He watched me cook, sleep, cry, shower, and he kept it all to himself like it was a collection. Shattered something in me. When public eye made a choice, I could stay quiet and move on, or I could speak up. I chose the second option. With the help of a journalist friend of Kayla's, I gave a statement. I talked about what happened without graphic details, but enough to expose the core truth. I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking to warn others. People need to know that this can happen, that it does happen, and that it's not always some creepy stranger. Sometimes it's the quiet landlord, the man next door. Part 3. The fallout after going public. Everything snowballed faster than I imagined. Local news stations reached out, a few national ones too. At first, I declined most of them. I wasn't looking for fame. I just wanted to feel like I had a voice after being violated. But the more people messaged me saying, this happened to me too, the more I realized something chilling. This wasn't rare, what Greg did to me. To others, was part of a much larger epidemic of privacy violations that too often went unpunished. I hadn't just stumbled into a personal nightmare. I'd uncovered a system of silent abuse that thrived in the shadows. I agreed to an interview. Then another. My face was blurred. My name changed, but my story? I made sure it was heard. Community outrage back at the building. Chaos unfolded. Other tenants began demanding answers. 2 women in Unit 3C had lived there for 4 years. They discovered their smoke detector had been replaced 2 years ago by Greg himself. Now they wondered if they'd been recorded. 2. The detective told me they were reviewing all recovered footage, apartment by apartment. It would take time. Greg's entire building became a crime scene. He'd owned it for over a decade. Every tenant was a possible victim. Lawsuits were coming, and lots of them. And me? I wasn't done either. Civil suit detective Ramirez helped me connect with a victim's rights attorney. They walked me through the process of filing a civil suit against Greg, even though he was facing criminal charges. I deserved compensation for what he did to me, for the trauma, the therapy costs, and the damage done to my reputation and mental health. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was about taking power back. The attorney filed the suit and subpoenaed Greg's assets. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't broke either. He owned the building outright, had a second property 2 towns over, and he'd been quietly renting out a few extra units under the table. That made him vulnerable. The lawyer was confident. He's going to pay, one way or another. My life changed, but let me be honest, even with justice coming, my personal life was a mess. I had trouble sleeping. I couldn't be alone in a room without scanning it. My therapist said it was classic hypervigilance. A common trauma response. I'd develop compulsions, checking under every table, every vent, tapping walls, covering electronics with tape, sleeping with the light on. It was exhausting. Friends tried to help. Kayla was incredible, but even around people I trusted, I had moments of anxiety. I'd freeze during conversations. I'd excuse myself from group dinners just to sit alone in silence and breathe. The worst part? I started to blame myself. I wondered if I was naive, if I'd missed something, if I'd let this happen. But that's the poison of being violated like that. It twists their crime into your shame. I had to fight that feeling every single day. Uh, Stranger reached out about a month after Greg's arrest. I got a message request on social media. It was a woman named Elena. Her message was short. I used to live in that building. Can we talk? We set up a phone call. Elena told me she'd lived in Unit 2 about 4 years ago, back when Greg still managed the building more directly. She said she always had a strange feeling about him. She said things would move around. Her apartment, her underwear drawer once ended up flipped. She'd asked Greg about it, and he claimed someone must have broken in, but didn't call the police or offer to check security footage. Now, after hearing about my story, everything clicked. Elena had left the apartment mid-lease. She'd felt paranoid and unsafe, but she had no proof. I asked her if she'd be willing to talk to my lawyer. She said yes. Trial date set in the middle of everything. I got the call I'd been both hoping for and dreading. The trial date was set. Greg had pleaded not guilty, probably hoping for a plea deal later. But that meant there would be a court date. Witnesses, testimonies, evidence, shown publicly. The DE asked if I'd be willing to testify. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. This man had filmed me, had cataloged me, had watched me when I didn't know I was being watched. He needed to see my face again. This time, not through a camera, but across a courtroom. Online reaction as more people heard about the case. The online conversation exploded. People shared their own stories. Some terrifying, some unresolved, some brushed off by authorities. A few people called me brave. Others said I was overreacting and should be flattered. Those comments made my skin crawl. It reminded me that the world still has a long way to go in understanding how deeply violating this kind of crime is, how it follows you, lives inside your brain. But I also got messages from people, mostly women, who told me my story pushed them to check their homes. Some even found cameras. That's when I realized what happened to me might help prevent it from happening to someone else. That didn't make it. Okay, but it made it matter. Part 4. The courtroom and the confession. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in mood. The trial started 6 weeks after the official indictment. Greg showed up in a gray suit that looked deliberately chosen to seem humble. He didn't look at me when I entered. He stared straight ahead like I wasn't there. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution, palms sweating, stomach turning. Detective Ramirez gave me a small nod of encouragement. My attorney leaned over and whispered, "You've got this." The judge read the charges. Multiple counts of unlawful surveillance, tampering, invasion of privacy. Then it began. The testimony first came the forensic techs. They explained how the devices were found, how they'd been disguised to blend into fire alarms, vents, even a smoke detector in one apartment. They showed photos to the jury, one of the camera hidden behind my bathroom mirror, angled directly at the shower. The audience gasped. I felt my chest tighten. Then came my turn. I was sworn in. Took the stand. My voice trembled at first, but once I started speaking, it flowed. I told them how I found the camera, how I confronted Greg, how he gaslit me, how the footage was confirmed, how I learned this wasn't an isolated incident. When I described the panic attacks, the obsessive checking of outlets and vents, I saw jurors nodding slowly. Greg still wouldn't look at me, but I looked at him, and I didn't blink. Elena's brave moment to my surprise. Elena, the woman who had messaged me, agreed to testify too. She told the court about her time in the building years earlier, about how she felt watched, about the drawer that had been rifled through, about Greg's dismissive response. I didn't have proof, she said, but I knew. I knew something wasn't right, and now I know I wasn't crazy. Her voice cracked. A few people in the gallery wiped away tears. Her testimony strengthened the case. It painted Greg not as a man who made one bad decision, but someone who had been doing this for years. The defense's weak attempt, Greg. Lawyer tried to argue that the cameras were security devices, that he had installed them to prevent theft and forgot to disclose them, that it was laughable, that why were the devices hidden? Why were they only in certain tenants' bathrooms and bedrooms? Why no signs were noticed? It didn't hold up. The prosecution destroyed the claim within minutes, especially when they introduced the time-stamped videos, footage that showed me undressing, brushing my teeth, footage where Greg had labeled the files by tenant. Name and time of day. There was no excuse for that. None. Verdict. The trial lasted 5 days. On the final day, I didn't sleep at all. I just sat by the window watching the sun. Rise. We returned to the courtroom. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood. On the charge of unlawful surveillance, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of invasion of privacy, guilty. On all counts, guilty. I felt tears in my eyes. He was taken into custody immediately. No more smirks. No more manipulation. Just silence. For the first time since I found that camera, I felt safe. Aftermath. The judge later sentenced Greg to 7 years in prison, plus mandatory registry as a sex offender. He would never manage another property. Never hold another position of trust again. More tenants came forward after the conviction. Some from buildings I'd never heard of. Turns out Greg had helped out at other rentals before he bought ours. My attorney helped connect them with prosecutors. The case opened doors for new investigations. I became an accidental advocate. Media storm after the verdict. More media requests poured in. I declined most of them, but I did one final interview. Not about me, but about how to protect your privacy. I talked about how to spot hidden cameras, how to know your rights as a tenant, how to push back when your gut tells you something's wrong. It went viral. A woman in another state messaged me, saying she found a disguised camera in a hotel room because of that video. That's when I stopped feeling like a victim. I started feeling like a survivor. Closure. Almost Kayla threw me a small get-together. A week after sentencing. Just a few close friends, pizza, and a bad karaoke. It was the first time I laughed, genuinely laughed, in months. We coasted to justice, to safety, to resilience. I still had therapy. I still had nightmares. I also had power again. When people asked how I stayed strong, I told them the truth. I didn't, not always. Some nights I curled up on the floor shaking. But I got back up. I chose not to let him win. Now, keep choosing that. Part 5. Starting over, it's strange how silence can feel safe again. For months after the trial, every creak in my apartment made my skin crawl. Every glint of metal in a corner made me freeze. I double-checked smoke detectors. I stopped changing with the lights on. I unplugged everything I didn't trust, even my toaster. But over time, the silence became something else. Not emptiness. Not paranoia. Peace. Moving out. Moving Oni didn't stay in that apartment. Even though Greg was in prison, the walls still whispered memories. I found myself avoiding certain rooms, flinching at my own reflection. So I left. Kayla helped me find a new place. A bright studio across town with big windows and no shared walls. The kind of place where light pours in and shadows have nowhere to hide. I bought new furniture, tossed my old clothes. Started fresh, room by room. Some nights, I still dream I'm being watched. But they're just dreams now. Not warnings. Therapy. Trust and rebuilding. I kept going to therapy. At first it felt useless. Like no amount of talking could erase what happened. But healing isn't erasing. It's understanding. I learned how deeply trauma can rewire your brain. How control becomes an obsession when it's been ripped from you. How anger can be a shield and also a prison. Most importantly, I learned that what happened wasn't my fault. I didn't let it happen. I survived it. And now I was learning to live beyond it. A letter from prison 2 months after the sentencing. I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside, a plain white page. I know you'll probably burn this. But if you're reading it, I'm sorry. I watched you cry on your couch once after a phone call. I felt nothing then. Now I see how wrong I was. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know I finally see you as a person, not a project. No name, but I knew it was from Greg. I didn't reply. I didn't burn it either. I kept it, tucked away in the back of my file cabinet, not as closure, but as evidence of who I survived. Going public on my terms 6 months later. A podcast producer reached out. She wanted to tell my story, but this time she didn't want shock value. She wanted to focus on tenant rights, surveillance laws, healing. I said, yes. We recorded over several weeks, carefully, thoughtfully. We didn't just talk about the crime. We talked about after, about the long, quiet panic of moving forward. The episode aired and went viral within a week. Other survivors reached out. Some had similar stories. Some were just grateful. Someone was speaking up. They helped me heal more than I expected. I wasn't just that girl with the camera in her wall. I was someone who spoke up, fought back, reclaimed her story. Kayla's message one night, a few months later. I was out with Kayla. We were watching terrible reality TV at her place, both in sweats, laughing over burnt popcorn. She suddenly turned to me, serious. You know what I think? She said. What? You were the first domino? Because you pushed back, other people did too. You didn't just save yourself. You probably saved people you'll never meet. I didn't know what to say, but something inside me shifted. For the first time, I believed it. Dating again. It took a while, but eventually, I went on a date. Then another. It was awkward at first. I had to fight the urge to check every angle of the room. But the guy, Mark, was patient, funny, soft-spoken. On our third date, I told him the whole story. He didn't flinch. He listened. He asked questions that didn't make me feel like a curiosity. He said, that's horrible, and brave, and messed up. And I'm glad you're here. We're not rushing anything. But it feels good to let someone in again, on my own terms. Final thoughts if you're reading this and something doesn't feel right in your space. Trust that instinct. Check. Ask. Push back. It doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you aware. And if someone crosses your boundaries in your home, in your life, you're allowed to fight back, not with fire, but with truth, with evidence, with your voice. That's what saved me. That's what set me free. Epilogue. 1 year later, it's been a year. Greg is still in prison. My new apartment feels like mine now. Kayla and I still do movie nights. Mark and I are still seeing each other. And me, I sleep with both eyes closed now. Not because the world is safer, but because I am stronger. I survived being watched. And now, when I look in the mirror, I see myself again.